I was ready to die, but awoke beside the Apache widow in a forbidden night. The man walked slowly across the dry, rugged land, each step heavier than the last. The sun had been high in the sky hours ago, and now it was dipping behind distant hills, painting the desert in shades of orange and red.
He felt empty, as if every ounce of strength had been drained from his body.
His clothes were worn and dusty, his shoes torn, and his hands were cracked from long travel without rest. He carried no weapon, no food, no water. Only the memories of what he had lost. Memories that weighed on him more than the sun and the sand combined. He had once known a life full of laughter and hope, but all of that had vanished. His family was gone, taken by sickness and by the cruel twists of fate. His friends had either moved on or disappeared. The life he had built, little by little, had collapsed like a house of fragile cards, and now, alone in the wide, empty desert, he felt as though he had no reason to keep walking. He had reached the edge of his endurance, the edge of life itself. Each breath was a struggle, each step a reminder that he was still alive when he wished he were not. As he stumbled over a jagged rock, he looked around at the endless horizon. The wind blew hot and dry, carrying the scent of earth and sagebrush. It whispered through the sparse trees and scrub, a lonely, mournful sound. He could hear the faint cries of birds settling down for the night, and the world seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful, as if it were watching him, waiting. He felt a strange pull, a quiet voice inside him that told him it was time to stop, that maybe the world would finally let him rest. He wanted to lie down on the warm, rough ground, close his eyes, and never wake up again. It was a feeling he had never experienced before, a mixture of relief and surrender. But even as despair pressed down on him, a tiny part of him resisted. That part, buried deep under layers of grief and exhaustion, told him that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely done.
He had heard stories in the past, stories of people who had found help when they least expected it, who had survived when the world seemed ready to let them fall.
He tried to hold on to that small thread of hope, but it was fraying quickly, like an old rope ready to snap. Night was falling fast now. Shadows stretched across the desert floor, turning rocks and bushes into strange, dark shapes. The air was cooler, but it carried a new sense of danger. Wild animals moved quietly in the distance, and he knew that alone, unarmed and weak, he was at risk. His mind wandered back to the day his life had changed forever, the day everything fell apart. He remembered the faces of those he loved, the laughter, the small daily joys he had taken for granted. Now, each memory brought both pain and a strange comfort. He wished he could go back, but he knew it was impossible. All that remained were fragments of the past, fragile and fleeting. He stumbled again, nearly falling. This time he didn't catch himself. He landed on his knees, scraping his palms on the rough ground. Pain shot up his arms, but he hardly noticed. It was the kind of pain that didn't matter anymore because it was nothing compared to the weight of loss he carried in his heart. He stayed on his knees for a while, breathing heavily, staring at the fading light of the horizon. He wondered if this would be the last sunset he would ever see. The thought did not frighten him as much as it should have. Instead, it brought a strange calm. Maybe, he thought, it was time to let go. Maybe it was finally okay to give in. As darkness settled completely, he felt the cold creeping in. The desert night was beautiful in its way, but also unforgiving. The stars shone brilliantly overhead, countless tiny lights scattered across the sky, indifferent to his suffering. The moon cast silver shadows that danced over the rocks and sand. He lay down on the ground, exhausted beyond measure, and stared up at the sky. It was vast, endless, and he felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. And yet, There was something humbling in that smallness, a reminder that he was part of a bigger world, even if he had no place left in it. His thoughts drifted to the people he had known. Faces of friends, family, strangers who had shown him kindness flashed in his mind. Some memories brought tears, some brought bitter regrets, but all reminded him that life had once been full, vibrant, and warm. Now it felt cold and empty, a shadow of what had been. He closed his eyes, feeling the heaviness of the earth beneath him. He could almost imagine slipping away quietly, melting into the sand and darkness, leaving nothing behind. The thought was tempting. He could feel it calling him, whispering that surrender was safe, peaceful, and final. Just as he was ready to let go, he heard a sound. It was faint at first, almost like the brush of wind or the rustle of leaves, but it grew clearer. Footsteps.
Careful, soft, deliberate steps. Someone was approaching.
He tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. Weakness pinned him to the ground. Panic surged through him for a moment, followed by confusion. Who could be out here at this hour? Was it friend or foe? He had no way to defend himself. Braced, but his body could not respond. The figure appeared slowly, moving with caution. It was a woman. She was alone, dressed simply, with a presence that seemed strong, yet gentle. Her eyes were focused on him, studying him as if she could see into his very soul. He could tell immediately that she was different from anyone he had met. Brave, she moved with a quiet authority, a calmness that seemed to push back the darkness pressing on him. She came close enough to kneel beside him, but not so close as to overwhelm him. There was an unspoken understanding in her gaze, a recognition of the pain and despair that had brought him to this place. He wanted to speak, to beg for help, but his voice would not come. He was too weak, too broken, and the words stuck in his throat. The woman seemed to understand, though. She did not ask questions. She did not judge. Grasp. She simply reached out, offering a hand and a small bundle of water and cloth. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment it felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Grasp. He reached out as best as he could, his fingers barely brushing hers. The warmth of her hand, so small but steady, sent a spark of life back into him. For the first time in days, he felt the faintest glimmer of hope.
The woman worked quickly, helping him to sit up and drink.
She moved with care, tending to his wounds and offering comfort without words. He could feel her presence as a protective shield, keeping the night and the cold and the fear at bay. He realized then that he was not entirely alone. That maybe, against all odds, life had not abandoned him completely. He was not ready to die, not yet, not while there was still someone willing to reach out to him, someone willing to defy the silence and the rules of the world around them, to offer kindness. The night deepened, and the desert around them became quiet again. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if bearing witness to this fragile, unexpected connection. He could not speak, and he did not try. He simply rested, leaning slightly against her, feeling a warmth and safety he had not known in a long time. And as he drifted toward sleep, he realized that the edge of death he had been standing on had been softened, even if only slightly, by this small act of care. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to hope that the night might bring more than darkness, that it might bring life, renewal, and the possibility of a new beginning. The woman watched the man carefully as he drank the water she had offered. She had seen many things in her life, hardships that tested her courage and strength, but this was something different. She had been trained by her people to respect the rules, to honor the boundaries that kept her safe, and yet, here she was, bending them, helping a stranger, an outsider, especially a man, was forbidden. Her people believed that strangers could bring danger, that outsiders could upset the delicate balance of their lives. Yet when she saw him, so weak, so broken, so close to death, her instincts told her that she could not leave him alone. Her name was not often spoken outside her family, but she carried the memory of her late husband in every step she took. He had been a brave man, kind and protective, and his loss had left a hole in her life that nothing could fill. She had spent years in quiet mourning, tending to her home, her small garden, and her duties to the tribe. Life had become routine, predictable, safe, yet lonely. She had told herself over and over that she needed to stay strong, to follow the rules, and to protect herself from danger. And yet, as she looked at this man lying helpless on the ground, she realized that sometimes courage meant risking everything for the sake of another. She moved closer, kneeling beside him, and examined his condition. His skin was pale and dry. His lips cracked, and his body shook from exhaustion and hunger. He had been traveling for a long time, she could tell, and his wounds had not been treated. The thought of leaving him here made her stomach turn. She knew that if she ignored him, he might not survive the night. The desert could be merciless, and there were animals, storms, and cold that could take him at any moment. And yet, helping him could bring trouble not only to herself, but to the tribe if anyone discovered her actions. Still, she could not turn away. She gently helped him sit up, careful not to hurt him further. Her hands were steady, her touch light but firm. She offered him a cloth to wipe the dirt and sweat from his face. He accepted it silently, too tired to speak, and for the first time in days he felt cared for. The warmth of her presence was unlike anything he had felt in a long while. It was quiet, simple, and yet powerful. He realized that someone had risked breaking rules, risking their safety, just to help him survive. That thought alone filled him with a strange mixture of gratitude and awe. As the night deepened, she began to move him toward a small shelter she had prepared. Grasp. It was not much, a simple structure made of wood and cloth, enough to protect someone from the cold and wind, but it would be enough for him to rest and recover. She helped him lie down on a blanket, carefully adjusting his position so that he would be comfortable. Every movement was careful and deliberate. She could see the tension in his body, the exhaustion that made even small actions difficult. She spoke softly, reassuring him without words, using only her eyes and gentle movements. While she worked, her mind was racing. She knew the consequences of what she was doing. If the tribe discovered her helping him, she could be punished. People might think she had acted selfishly or recklessly. She might be shunned, or worse. And yet, she felt a deep sense of duty. Not to the rules, but to life itself. The man before her was human, like herself, and he needed help. That was enough reason for her to act. The rules of the tribe were important, yes, but they were made to guide life, not to destroy it. Break. She could follow the rules and still honor life, she told herself. And tonight, that meant saving him. The man slowly opened his eyes again. He looked around, confused at first, then focused on her.
He wanted to ask questions, to understand who she was and why she was helping him, but his voice was weak and hoarse.
She smiled faintly, understanding his struggle. Instead of words, she handed him some more water and gestured for him to rest, whining it despite without hesitation, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. The world suddenly seemed a little less lonely. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt that maybe he had a chance to survive. They stayed in silence for a while. The wind outside whispered through the small shelter, carrying the sounds of the desert night. Crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. It was a quiet, peaceful night, yet filled with unspoken tension. Both of them were aware of the risks. Both were aware of the
of discovery, yet neither spoke of it.
Words were unnecessary. They only needed to exist in the same space, sharing the fragile moment of survival. As hours passed, the man began to regain some strength. He could sit up more easily, move his arms, and even eat a little of the food she had prepared. Breath. She watched him carefully, making sure not to push him too far too fast. Every small improvement brought her relief. She had risked everything to help him, and seeing him improve justified her actions. But even as she helped, she kept one eye on the night outside. She could not afford to be careless. Every shadow, every sound could mean discovery. She had to protect him, yes, but she also had to protect herself. There were moments when he would fall back into despair, remembering the loss and pain that had brought him here. She did not force him to speak. But sometimes she would gently touch his hand or place a cloth on his forehead. She offered comfort in ways that words could not. Slowly, slowly, he began to trust her. He began to understand that not all people were cruel, that kindness could come even in the most unexpected of circumstances. And in that understanding, he found something he had not felt in a long time: hope. Bright. Night turned deeper, the darkness settling over the desert like a heavy blanket. The stars above were bright, scattered across the sky in silent testimony to the vastness of the world. He looked at them occasionally, but mostly, he focused on the woman beside him. He wanted to ask her name, to know more about her, but he realized that it was not the time yet. The night was theirs, a quiet space of survival and care. He did not want to disturb the fragile peace with questions or explanations. For now, being alive, being cared for, and feeling safe was enough. She stayed awake much longer than he did, tending to his needs, keeping watch for any danger. Her body ached from the effort, and her mind was filled with worry, yet she did not falter. She had learned from life that courage was not about fearlessness, but about action, despite fear. She had been afraid when she first saw him lying on the desert ground. Yet she had acted. She had risked everything, and she would continue to do so until he could stand on his own. Breath. Her heart beat steadily, each pulse a reminder of her strength, her humanity, and the quiet power of compassion. Hours passed, and the man began to sleep peacefully. He did not know if he would wake up, and perhaps he did not care. But the woman stayed near, a silent guardian, ready to protect him until dawn. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this night was different. It was not about survival in the wild, not about following tradition or avoiding danger. It was about connection, about the fragile bond between two people thrown together by circumstance. But she had risked rules, risked danger, and yet she felt a deep sense of purpose. This night, she realized, mattered more than any tradition. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the woman finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She sat quietly, watching him sleep, her hands folded in her lap. The desert was calm, bathed in golden light. The night of risk, care, and silent understanding was ending. The man was alive, though still weak. And though she could not speak, she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had acted, that she had made a difference. She had defied fear and tradition, and in doing so, had preserved life. That was more important than anything else. In that quiet morning, a bond had begun to form between them, fragile yet unbreakable in its own way. They were two strangers from different worlds, brought together by chance and circumstance, yet connected by a shared understanding of pain, survival, and humanity. The desert had tested them both, but it had also created a space where courage, compassion, and trust could exist. And as they prepared for the day ahead, neither spoke of rules, danger, or fear. For now it was enough that life had been saved, and that the night had shown them both what it meant to care for another. The man awoke slowly, the warmth of the shelter and the soft light of dawn brushing against his closed eyelids. He blinked several times, adjusting to the new day, and for a moment he was unsure where he was. His body still ached, but the pain was gentler than it had been the night before. He felt the effects of the water, food, and care he had received, and a strange sense of life returned to his limbs. As he tried to sit up, he realized the presence of someone beside him, a quiet, steady presence that had been there through the darkest hours. The woman, the Apache widow, was still there, watching over him as if she had never slept. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand why she had risked so much to help him, but the words stuck in his throat. He was still weak, still uncertain if he deserved the kindness he had received. Burp. She noticed his hesitation and smiled faintly, a gentle, reassuring smile that carried more meaning than words ever could. It was not a smile of joy or triumph. It was a smile that said, "You are safe. For now. You are not alone." And in that smile he found the courage to try again. He managed to croak a quiet, "Thank you." And though it was barely audible, she heard it clearly. That was enough. The morning passed slowly, filled with small, careful actions. She helped him to stand, supporting his weight, guiding him through the shelter, and helping him stretch muscles that had been stiff and sore from exhaustion. She gave him more food and water, but in small portions, knowing his body could not yet handle too much at once.
Every gesture was deliberate, every movement thoughtful. She moved with quiet confidence, a balance of strength and care that reminded him that even in the harshest places, life could be gentle.
He could feel the bond between them growing, quiet but undeniable. A fragile connection formed in the shared struggle of survival.
As he regained some strength, he began to ask questions, though carefully.
Why did you help me?" he asked, his voice still weak. She paused for a moment, thinking carefully before answering. "Because you needed it," she said simply. "Because life is precious. Because sometimes rules and fear are not enough to keep a person safe." There was no judgment in her voice, no lecture, only truth. And in her words, he realized the depth of her courage.
She had defied everything she had been taught, risked everything she knew just to give him a chance to live. It humbled him, made him aware of how fragile life was and how powerful kindness could be.
He wanted to know more about her, but he understood that now was not the time for long stories. They needed to survive the day, to find a safe path forward. Still, the questions lingered in his mind. Who was she? How had she learned to be so brave? What life had she lived before this moment? She answered some of them slowly, giving only what was necessary, never revealing too much, yet sharing enough to let him see that she was human, like him, with her own stories of loss and survival. Each answer deepened his respect. Each glance carried unspoken understanding. The hours of the day brought new challenges. The desert, which had seemed peaceful at night, now revealed its harshness. The sun was fierce, beating down on them, and water was scarce. They moved carefully, the woman guiding him along paths she knew, showing him safe spots where he could rest and shade where he could recover. She taught him how to recognize signs of danger, how to move quietly, and how to conserve energy. The man listened intently, realizing that every lesson she offered was a gift, one that could mean the difference between life and death. He had never been taught these things, and yet he trusted her completely, as though instinctively knowing that she would never lead him astray. As the day wore on, the man's body began to regain more strength, but his mind was still burdened by fear and doubt. He feared that their time together might not last, that discovery or danger could separate them. He worried about the consequences of her actions, the risks she had taken on his behalf. Yet at the same time, he could not help but feel a growing sense of gratitude, admiration, and even wonder. Brash. She had appeared in his life at the very moment he was ready to give up, offering not only survival but dignity, care, and trust. He realized that the night they had shared, the silence and vigilance had forged a connection that neither of them could deny, no matter the dangers that lay ahead. Evening approached, and with it, a gentle calm. The harsh sun faded, and the desert began to cool, the colors of the sky shifting to soft pinks and purples. They found a sheltered spot to rest, and she helped him sit comfortably, breaths. He noticed small details about her, how her hands moved with confidence, how her eyes scanned the surroundings, how every action was deliberate and precise. She was quiet, but not distant. There was a softness to her presence, a sense of protection that reassured him more than words ever could. For the first time in weeks, he felt a deep sense of peace, as though he had found a small sanctuary in the vast, unforgiving desert. During this quiet evening, the man began to share fragments of his story. He spoke of the family he had lost, the mistakes he had made, the moments of despair that had led him to the brink. He did not tell everything, not yet, but he spoke enough to show that he was human, that he carried pain, regret, and longing within him. She listened without interruption, without judgment. Her presence allowed him to open up, to acknowledge the depths of his suffering without fear. And in listening, she gave him more than survival. She gave him a sense of being seen, being understood, being valued. Night fell again, and with it a deep sense of intimacy developed, not in a physical way, but in the closeness of shared humanity. They sat near each other, careful and respectful, yet aware of the unspoken bond forming. Each gesture, each glance, each careful movement carried meaning. The man realized that he had not felt this kind of connection in years, not since before his life had fallen apart. It was strange and unfamiliar, yet comforting. He felt a warmth he could not name, a feeling that he had been missing for too long. And, though the night was forbidden, dangerous in ways he did not fully understand, he felt that somehow it was meant to happen. The woman, for her part, also felt the shift. She had acted out of instinct, out of compassion, yet she could not ignore the quiet significance of their time together. She had been lonely, mourning her own losses, yet helping him had awakened a part of her that she thought had been lost forever. The night had tested her, risked her safety, and demanded courage she did not know she possessed. And now, as they shared the quiet, careful moments of survival, she realized that she had not only saved his life, but had been reminded of her own strength, her own humanity, and the power of simple acts of kindness. They did not speak much as the night deepened. Words were unnecessary. The desert around them was silent, save for the occasional whisper of wind or distant call of an animal. They focused on the small tasks that kept them alive, watching for danger, tending to wounds, keeping warm, and offering silent comfort. Every shared glance, every gesture, every simple act became a symbol of trust, courage, and understanding. And in the stillness of that night, both realized that something significant had begun. A connection neither expected, born of shared struggle, survival, and respect. By the time sleep finally came, it was a deep, quiet sleep, the kind that comes only after exhaustion, relief, and a sense of safety. The man rested, feeling protected and cared for in a way he had not felt in years. The woman remained nearby, vigilant and watchful, knowing that the night was still dangerous, but confident that together they could face what came next. In the darkness and the quiet, they had both discovered something essential. Life could be harsh and unforgiving, but compassion, courage, and trust could create moments of hope even in the most impossible circumstances. The morning light filtered softly through the shelter, casting long shadows on the desert floor. The man awoke slowly, feeling stronger than the previous day, though still fragile. He looked at the woman beside him, the Apache widow, and a wave of gratitude washed over him. She had saved his life, risked everything to protect him, and yet her face showed no pride, no claim for recognition, only quiet resolve. He wondered how someone could carry so much courage and kindness at the same time, and he felt a deep respect growing inside him. But the peace of the morning was fragile. Outside the shelter, the desert was alive with movement, small animals rustling, the wind carrying dry leaves across the sand, and in the distance, faint signs of human activity. The man remembered the warnings he had heard about strangers and the dangers of wandering into a tribe's territory without permission. Every step they had taken together so far had been quiet, cautious, and careful. But he now realized that the night had passed, and daylight brought new challenges. Discovery could come at any moment, and the consequences could be severe, not just for him, but for her. He sat up and tried to speak, his voice stronger than before. We should move, he said softly, almost afraid to break the silence. She nodded, understanding immediately. She had been thinking the same thing. Night had offered protection, but the day exposed them. Their presence in this place was delicate, fragile, and if anyone saw them together, questions would arise, and perhaps punishment. She could not risk the safety of her people for his survival forever. Yet, leaving him too early could be dangerous as well. He was still weak, still recovering, and the desert would not forgive carelessness. As they prepared to move, the man struggled with an internal storm. He was grateful for her care, yet guilt gnawed at him. She had risked her safety for him, and he knew the rules she had broken could bring consequences. He wondered how he could ever repay such kindness. Every step was weighted with the knowledge that his survival might cost her dearly. But as he looked at her steady, determined, and fearless, he realized that she had acted without thought of reward or recognition. She had followed her heart, and he had no choice but to respect and honor that decision. The woman, for her part, also felt the pressure of reality. She had defied her people's rules to help him. And now she faced a moral and emotional dilemma. Should she continue to protect him, risking herself and her standing within the tribe, or should she follow tradition, ensuring her safety but possibly letting him face danger alone? Her heart urged her to stay, to continue caring for him, but her mind reminded her of the rules, of the consequences that could follow. It was a conflict she had never anticipated, one that weighed heavily on her with each passing hour. They moved carefully through the desert, using paths she knew, avoiding areas where people might be. She guided him to shaded spots to rest, pointing out sources of water or safer terrain. He followed her instructions without hesitation, trusting her completely. The bond between them was silent but powerful, a connection built not on words but on shared experience, mutual care and understanding. The desert itself seemed to watch them, vast and unyielding, yet offering small moments of relief. A gentle breeze, a patch of shade, a soft spot of earth to rest upon. Despite the quiet trust between them, fear lingered in the man's mind. He wondered what would happen if the tribe discovered them, if they realized that she had protected him during the night. Would they see her as disloyal? Would they blame him for her actions? He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, heavier than any physical pain he had endured. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that he would leave if needed, but he was not strong enough to act decisively yet. And she, reading his hesitation, understood without a word. She could see his conflict, his guilt, and the fear that he carried like a shadow over his shoulders. As the sun climbed higher, the desert revealed its harshness. The heat became relentless, each step tiring them both, each movement an effort. Water was limited, and food even more scarce. The woman carefully rationed supplies, making sure that the man received enough to sustain him without overburdening his recovering body. She moved with a quiet efficiency, teaching him, guiding him and protecting him from the challenges of the harsh environment. So he helped a growing admiration in his bed. He cast back to closer aspects of Invaluable, and he felt a growing admiration not only for her courage, but also for her intelligence, her resourcefulness, and her deep understanding of survival.
By mid-afternoon, they found a small, sheltered area to rest.
The man finally spoke, voicing the thoughts that had been weighing on him. I don't know how to repay you.
You risked so much for me. I shouldn't be alive if it weren't for you.
She shook her head gently, refusing to allow guilt to dominate. There is no need for repayment, she said quietly. Precipice. I did what I had to do. Life is precious. You survived, and that is enough. Her words were simple, but they carried immense weight. He realized that she had acted not out of obligation, not out of fear or duty, but out of compassion and courage. That was a lesson he would carry with him forever. Even as they rested, the threat of discovery was never far from their minds. They moved quietly, carefully scanning the horizon for any signs of other people. The man noticed how alert she remained, how her eyes constantly searched for danger, and how every small sound made her react instinctively. It was clear that she had lived through hardships and had learned to survive by being vigilant. He tried to match her awareness, but he knew that he would never fully understand the depth of her experience. Still, he followed her guidance, learning not only the practical skills of survival, but also the strength that came from courage and discipline. As evening approached, the desert cooled slightly, but the dangers remained. They found another spot to rest for the night, and the man could see the tension in her face soften slightly. Breath she, too, carried fear and uncertainty, yet she did not let it dominate her actions. Her calmness, her quiet determination, and her willingness to protect him at all costs had become a source of strength for him. He was no longer just surviving. He was learning, growing, and finding a sense of purpose that had long been absent. In her presence, he understood what it meant to trust, to hope, and to be human again. Night fell once more, and the dangers of the desert seemed to shrink beneath the quiet of their bond. They sat close, but respectful, sharing warmth and presence without the need for words. The man felt the depth of her sacrifice, the courage it had taken to protect him, and the risk she had assumed. He wanted to express gratitude, admiration, and perhaps more, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, he simply remained near her, aware of her presence, and absorbing the quiet strength she radiated. In this unspoken understanding, they found comfort, connection, and a shared resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The night passed slowly, but without incident. They survived together, moving carefully, resting when necessary, and maintaining vigilance. Each moment was a reminder of the fragile balance between life and danger, trust, and consequence. The man realized that their journey was not just about physical survival. It was about navigating fear, guilt, and the moral choices that defined them. The woman had risked everything for him, and he knew that his actions in the coming days could determine the outcome of both their lives. That realization weighed heavily, yet it also strengthened his resolve to honor her bravery and guidance. By dawn, they were exhausted but alive. The night had tested their courage, patience, and moral strength. They had survived together, each learning from the other, each growing in ways they had never anticipated. The man understood that the woman's care had been a gift, one that went beyond survival. It had reminded him of humanity, of trust, and of the power of compassion in the face of fear and tradition. And she, too, had discovered something essential. That courage was not simply following rules, but knowing when to risk for the sake of life, and that even in the harshest conditions, kindness could prevail. The desert dawn spread soft, golden light across the land, signaling a new day. The man had regained more strength, his steps firmer and his breathing steadier. The night had passed without incident, and the lessons of survival, courage, and trust had left their mark. He felt alive again. But with life came the weight of responsibility. The knowledge that the woman, the Apache widow, had risked everything for him, and that his choices now could affect both of them.
They prepared to move, carefully packing what little they had.
The desert around them was still, the heat rising slowly with the sun. Every step required attention. Every moment demanded vigilance. The man watched her as she moved, noting the ease and confidence with which she handled the simple tasks that were vital for survival. Her movements were precise, deliberate, and graceful, the result of years of knowledge and experience. He realized that she had survived not only the harshness of the desert, but also the rules, expectations, and dangers of her own life. She had learned to navigate challenges with courage and wisdom, and now she was guiding him through the same unforgiving landscape. Despite the physical challenges, the greater weight on his mind was the knowledge of their forbidden bond. The night they had shared, the care and attention she had given him, and the silent trust between them were acts that, if discovered, could bring consequences neither of them wanted. He thought about the tribe, about the rules she had defied, and about the dangers that might follow them. He could see the same awareness in her eyes, quiet, careful, watchful. They moved together in understanding, neither needing to speak of the risks, for they both knew. As the day passed, the desert presented its usual challenges. Breath. Sunlight beat down, forcing them to rest often in patches of shade. Water was scarce, and even small movements drained energy. Patiently, teaching him how to conserve strength, how to recognize safe terrain, and how to stay alert to subtle signs of danger. He learned quickly, eager to prove that he could carry some of the burden himself. Slowly, steadily, he regained not only strength but confidence. He felt the sense of being alive fully for the first time in years, and he knew it was thanks to her care and guidance. While they traveled, he could not suppress the thoughts about what would happen next. He knew that he could not stay with her forever. The rules of her people, the potential discovery, and the dangers outside their small moments of safety meant that separation was inevitable. Yet the thought of leaving her brought a strange ache, a mixture of gratitude, fear, and longing. He had come to value her presence more than he realized, not just for survival, but for the sense of hope, trust, and human connection she had given him. And he understood that leaving without acknowledging the depth of her kindness would feel like betrayal.
By mid-afternoon, they found a small canyon that offered shelter from the harsh sun.
They rested, sharing silence more than words, yet speaking volumes in glances, gestures, and presence. He realized how much he had come to rely on her, not just for guidance or survival, but for reassurance, for the quiet comfort of knowing someone cared deeply for him. And she, observing him, understood the bond that had formed, the fragile connection between two people from different worlds who had found trust and courage in one another. There was no shame, no improper intention, only respect, care, and shared understanding born of hardship. Even as they rested, the awareness of danger lingered. The desert could be unpredictable, and humans too could be unforgiving. The man felt a deep gratitude for the risk she had taken, for the nights she had stayed awake, for the protection she had offered. Without hesitation. Brett. He wanted to show her that he understood, that her courage had not gone unnoticed, but he also knew that words might be insufficient. Instead, he watched her, learning from her example, absorbing the lessons of patience, vigilance, and bravery she had shown from the first night until now. As evening approached, the shadows lengthened across the land, and the desert began to cool. They found a small hidden spot to rest, protected by rocks and brush. Here, for the last time together before the inevitable separation, the man and the woman shared a quiet space of understanding. They did not need to speak much. Every glance, every careful movement, every small gesture of care conveyed the gratitude, respect, and trust that words could not fully express. The man realized that this night would be remembered forever, not for danger or fear, but for courage, kindness, and the fragile bond they had formed. Night fell fully, and the desert became silent, almost sacred in its quiet. The man lay down feeling safe under her watchful presence, aware that this might be the last night he would spend with her. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of the past, of loss, and of hope for the future. He remembered the moments of despair that had brought him to the brink, and he realized how far he had come in such a short time. He owed his life to her. Not just in a physical sense, but in the way she had shown him that life could still hold meaning, care, and courage. Morning arrived again, and with it the difficult reality of separation. The man knew that he could not stay. The risk to her and to her people was too great. He could see it in her eyes, her quiet acknowledgement that their paths would diverge. She had guided him, protected him, and taught him lessons he would carry forever. Now it was time for him to continue alone, strengthened by her care and the lessons she had shared. He felt sorrow for leaving, but also a deep gratitude and respect by it. Their time together had changed him, reshaped his understanding of trust, courage, and compassion. He knelt before her, placing his hands over hers in silent acknowledgement. Words were unnecessary. His gesture conveyed the depth of his gratitude, respect, and the understanding that their bond, though brief, had been life-changing. She nodded, a small, quiet gesture of recognition and farewell. It was a moment filled with emotion, without need for elaborate speech, a shared understanding that their paths had crossed for a reason and that the experience would remain with them both forever. As he left, he walked carefully, aware of the terrain, of the risks, and of the fragile balance that had allowed him to survive until this moment. The desert stretched endlessly before him, harsh and unforgiving, yet he felt stronger, more alive, and more capable than he had in years. He carried with him not only the lessons of survival, water, shade, caution, but also the lessons of humanity. Courage, compassion, trust, and the power of selfless care. Every step was a reminder that he had been given a second chance, and that the gift of life came not only from nature, but from the kindness of another human being. The woman watched him leave, her heart heavy yet proud. She had acted according to her courage and compassion, and she knew that he would carry her lessons forward. Life in the desert would continue as always, difficult, unpredictable, and demanding, but she had affirmed for herself the strength of her own choices. Her actions had shown that even in the harshest conditions, kindness could survive, that courage could thrive in quiet, unassuming ways. She had risked rules, danger, and fear to protect another life, and in doing so, she had preserved her own humanity and the deep satisfaction of having acted rightly. As the man disappeared into the distance, the desert seemed larger, wilder, yet more full of possibility. He walked with a new sense of purpose, aware that his life had been given back to him not by chance alone, but by the bravery and compassion of the woman who had saved him. The bond they had shared, the lessons they had exchanged, and the courage they had inspired in each other would remain with him forever. Even in the vast, empty desert, he carried a sense of hope and resilience that would guide him for the rest of his days. Though they were separated by distance, the memory of that forbidden night, the care and the courage shared, would remain a guiding light for both. The man understood that survival was more than escaping danger. It was learning to trust, to hope, and to carry the lessons of humanity wherever life led him. The woman, too, carried the memory of the man she had saved, a reminder that even in solitude and hardship, acts of kindness could leave a lasting mark, shaping lives in ways both profound and eternal. In the end, their encounter in the desert became more than a story of survival. It became a story of courage, of trust, and of the enduring power of compassion. Though separated, both knew that their lives had been transformed. The man walked forward, strengthened by the lessons and care he had received, ready to face the challenges of life with renewed strength. The woman returned to her world, quietly carrying the knowledge that she had risked much, yet given life and hope in a moment where it mattered most.
And the desert, timeless and vast, held their story in its silence, a witness to the courage and humanity of two souls brought together in a forbidden night.